So everyone, I want to ask you a question. Are you living a life you love? Or is it more like you're living a life that you kind of like? Or maybe you're living a life that you really, really like, but there's a few areas that you could improve upon. So I am wondering, or maybe you're one of the people that might be like me saying, I can't wait to retire, and then I can relax, and I can do this, and I can do that. So maybe that's what you're thinking of. So I want to ask you, why wait to enjoy your life and reap all the benefits of a good life? How can you enhance your life so you're truly living a life that you love right now? How about upgrading your life? Nowadays, we upgrade everything. We upgrade our hotel rooms. We upgrade our cell phone plans. We upgrade our technology. So let's talk about upgrading our life right here and right now. And what does it mean to upgrade? Upgrading means to improve. It means to replace components or to bring something to a higher standard. So let's think about upgrading or replacing an okay life with a life to the highest standards that it can be, which is living a life you love, a life filled with purpose, a life filled with joy and abundance, love, prosperity, and harmony. So I named this talk today, What Will You Allow God to Do Through You So You Can Live a Life That You Love? And I realize it's kind of a long title, but it captures exactly what I would like to share with you. And we can accomplish this by focusing on 3 A's. The 3 A's are allow, activity, and action. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start off by talking about the first one, the first A, allow. In the book, Creative Mind and Success, the author, Ernest Holmes, has said that God can do for us only what we will allow him to do through us. So that's our first A. This quote reminds us that God is already willing and able to create through us, but we have to recognize and allow this to happen. And what do I mean, allow God to do through me? And the definition of allow, according to dictionary.com, means consent or empower, give permission, or even release and give the go-ahead. Ernest Holmes talks about us consciously allowing when he wrote The Science of Mind. We've all heard of that book. It is goodness, life, law, and reason, and we are surrounded by an infinite possibility, he writes. In expressing itself through us, it becomes more fully conscious of its own being. Therefore, it wishes to express through us. As it passes into our being, it automatically becomes the law of our lives. It can pass into expression through us only if we consciously allow it to do so. Now, if you haven't heard of Ernest Holmes, as I had not when I first came to Joyful Gathering, he was an American New Thought writer, philosopher, teacher, and leader. He was the founder of the spiritual movement known as religious science, part of the greater New Thought movement, whose spiritual philosophy is known as the Science of Mind. All right, back to Ernest Holmes in Creative Mind and Success. Spirit is always seeking to express love and beauty through us. It is attuned to these and working in harmony with the great creative power we need have no doubt in its willingness to work for us. So I ask you, can you hear Holmes telling us that there is a force of good that wants to express itself through us? And what is it that we need to do? Just allow. This sounds so easy, doesn't it? And what are we allowing to come through us? Just the whole entire activity of God, infinite intelligence, and all the power of the divine being. We are allowing the life force of all to express through us when we allow. In the text Science of Mind, Holmes wrote, The divine urge is strong in man and constantly causes him to seek some form of self-expression through him. And like all other forces of nature, it can only work through man at his own bidding. It works consciously or unconsciously, for he is an individual and has self-choice. So I want to tell you about a chapter in Living the Science of Mind, one of my favorite books of Ernest Holmes. And this chapter is called Let God Do It. In this section, Holmes writes about this beautiful valley in the Colorado Rockies. In this valley, there are fountains, and each fountain is different in that water flows through some of the fountains, but not so much in other fountains. All the fountains use the same body of water, which is at a subterranean level, deep subterranean level, and it flows through each one of them. Each fountain uses this water, which has a pressure within itself, to flow upward with this irresistible force. We can compare this valley with our flow from our own spiritual nature. So just as there's a force and a pressure flowing through each of the fountains, there is a force flowing through each of us. But ours is not a water pressure, ours is rather a God pressure, the back of each one of us, a life force seeking an outlet through our thoughts and actions. There are many fountains and many individuals, but only one God pressure back of all. Each one of us is like these fountains, allowing the natural force to come through and flow through us. So let's visualize. Let's visualize this water coming through each of these pipes with the natural pressure pushing the water through. Now the pipe doesn't need to do anything. If it's a 1-inch pipe or a 10-inch pipe, the water is coming through easily and effortlessly in this natural pressure. Pressure. So let me repeat. The pipe does not need to do anything. The natural pressure is just coming through. But let's just imagine one of these pipes gets some dirt or some sand has gotten into the pipe, and now the water cannot come easily through. Just like us, sometimes we have these times when we allow a little dirt or a little sand to get into us, and the pipe in us, which we do not need to do anything for the light and the love and the joy of infinite light to come through. It's just a natural occurrence. All we need to do is allow it. Returning back to the book, Living the Science of Mind, and that same chapter, Let God Do It, each of us is a fountain of life. There is a God pressure back of each of us, a life force seeking outlet through our thoughts and our actions. There are many fountains, many individuals, but only one God pressure in the back of all of us. So let me ask you, why wouldn't you allow this creative expression to work for you? Well, let's think about sometimes the things that we do allow, to come through, that are not conducive to our highest good. It seems like at times we may allow those self-deprecating thoughts of worry or hurt or lack, fear, concern. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we allow those to come through to us. And we allow this type of thought to come in then. The opposite is happening. What is the opposite of allowing? Denying, refusing, rejecting, resisting, forbidding, and prohibiting. So let's talk about the language of allowing and not allowing in our everyday choices. So here's an example you can ask yourself. Do I allow the love of God to come in, as Holmes states, or do I deny this? Do I want to allow the clarity of God to come in, or do I refuse it? Do I want to allow all the peace and the harmony of the universe to come in, or do I sometimes block it? Do I allow the wisdom of infinite intelligence in to work through me, or sometimes do I reject it? And lastly, do I allow the creative inspiration in, or do I sometimes resist it? And I don't know about you, but I want to change my language to include the word allow, to allow the good of God to work through me. Let's remember that we are like the fountains in the Rockies. Are you allowing the flow of God's good to come through you easily and effortlessly? Or is your fountain a little blocked? Maybe not with dirt or sand, but with some limiting thoughts and beliefs. I am here to remind you that it is time to unblock the flow and allow the gifts of the infinite to flow through you and to you. And one way we can allow all the wisdom, all the intelligence, and clarity and harmony is to use affirmative statements, or maybe you've heard them as affirmations or mantras. So let's try out some of these affirmations together. So if you would kindly repeat after me. I allow the love of God into my life.
I allow the love of God into my life.
I allow the clarity of God into my life.
I allow the clarity of God into my life.
I allow the wisdom of infinite intelligence as my life.
I allow the wisdom of
Infinite intelligence as my life. I allow the creative inspiration into my life.
I allow the creative inspiration into my life.
So just breathe that in and just know this is the truth of who you are. Great. So before we move on to the second A activity, let's keep in mind that first allowing has to take place and then can come the activity. So now that we're allowing, let's move into the second part, activity. For the activity to take place, we must have a mental equivalent of what we want. Holmes wrote in Creative Mind and Success, we must know exactly what it is that we wish to get, the perfect mental image of it. We must believe that we have it now and never do or say anything that denies it. One of the most important things to remember is that we cannot demonstrate life beyond our mental ability to embody. We give birth to an idea only within ourselves. We must first think it forth into life. In order to have success, we must first conceive it in our thought. For the flow of life to manifest through us must take the form we give it. And if we want a thing, we must have it within ourselves, the mental equivalent, before we get it. And this is what Jesus meant when he said that we must believe when we pray. That belief is providing with us something which knows before it sees what it asks for. And in this thing called you, Holmes wrote, everything in life depends upon your belief. And it is done unto you as you believe. We've heard this many times. And Holmes wrote, change your belief and you can change your world. Now, when I speak of activity, I'm talking about what is happening within. It's something that no one can see happening. And the reason I say that is because in the past, if someone talked about activity, I always associate it with an outside busyness, like they're busy doing this, they're active doing this. But this kind of activity is an inside job. Holmes wrote that growth and realization always come from within and never from without. And this thing called you, when you say all things are possible, you mean that the power which created the planets, I'm not talking about a small power here, I am talking about the power that created the planets, is now operating in your affairs and in everything you do. Your faith in it clears your mind of fear and uncertainty and provides a channel through which the power may work for you. There is nothing in which this power cannot do for you if you learn how to use it. It is impossible to fail. End of quote. Now, how does that sound?
Pretty good.
Pretty good, right? So I always think of the activity part as the fun part. This is where you use your imagination. And this is where your imagination can come in. So when I'm ready for this, I just start imagining, what is it that I want to allow in my life? What is it that I want to co-create with the divine? Is it a trip? Is it a new job or a new position in my work life? Is it about new opportunities for community outreach? Maybe it's a fear that I want to work through. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Use your imagination. But this is only the beginning. Once I have the idea and I have it clear in my mind and I have the mental equivalent, this is where your senses can also come in too. So when creating your mental equivalent, think, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What opportunities would open up for me if I was allowing this? So the first part's allowing Spirit to create through you, and the second part is the strong mental equivalent of what you want. And I want to remind you, we don't have to know the how. We only have to know the what. Spirit does the how, and we do the what. In The Power of Decision, Raymond Charles Barker tells us, now I want to tell you this is a little long, but it's so worth it. The desires of your heart are the possibilities that can be manifested in your experience. They are restless to be born. Do not let your material humdrum thinking keep them stifled any longer. Desires are not hopes, nor are they dreams. They are potentials to be unearthed and brought to fruition. Start thinking of them as being not only possible, but they're already so. A few days of glimpsing their possibility can lead you into planning for their arrival, acting as it's already so. Take one of them and make it so by knowing it is so. There will be a response once you have delivered to your subconscious mind the ultimatum of your decision that this desire is to be made a fact. And he continues, most real desires have been thwarted by indecision. People go to their death with unfulfilled heart's desires because they never decided to act upon them. They were either too busy or too lazy or too tired. This is still Barker. Not you. Living the full life. You were busy, but not too busy. You are always alert, keen, and active. You can bring forth your heart's desires because now you have the tools with which to work. So, end of quote. So, just to review, our first step is to allow the good to come through, and the second is that we are bringing forth the inside activity of our mental image. And let's look at the last part, action. Action to creating a life that we love. On page 47 in Science of Mind, Holmes wrote, the mind must conceive before the creative energy can produce. Holmes is talking about our minds here. Remember the mental equivalent that I mentioned earlier? That's what he's talking about. We must supply the avenue through which it can work. Remember I talked about the allowing? That's the avenue. We are supplying the avenue when we allow it. And Holmes wrote, it, meaning the creative energy, is ready and willing. It is its nature to spring into being through our thought and our action. So what is the action part? What is that last part, the action part? Eric Butterworth tells us in Spiritual Economics that it's important to know that the creative process is at work in you all the time. Not just when you're having faith. Infinite mind is an activity that is constantly at work within you. You may be asleep to your God potential, but it's always present. Unless you begin to understand God as principle, you will go on living marginally. And who wants to live marginally? We want our wonderful, beautiful lives that we love. And Butterworth continues, the universal principle is before they call, I will answer. And that is found in Isaiah 65:24. I know you've heard that before. In the great unity of all life, when you have a need, the answer is already moving towards you. Before you formulate a desire in your mind, know that it's God that's doing the desiring. Before you have an urge to do something or embark on something, a project, there is already a moving of spirit prompting you in the right direction. So the beginning of taking action is believing that you already have everything you need to move forward in creating a life that you love. Butterworth also writes, when you say yes to the creative flow within you, you begin to experience the I am positive, I can attitudes, which turn on the power and the skills needed to accomplish it. When you believe you can do it, the how to do it just automatically shows up and develops. This is the way the creative process in the individual works. So Butterworth is affirming what we just talked about, that you have everything you already need to accomplish what you want to bring into your life when you operate from the belief that it's the creative energy of the infinite working through you to create the life that you love. Butterworth also mentions what can happen if you don't have the belief of being one with the creative energy. Disbelief. He says disbelief is a negative power that frustrates or turns off your inner potential. If you doubt something enough, the mind will attract all kinds of reasons to support disbelief. And just give me a little shout out if you've ever experienced that before, that you've had your mind center on that disbelief and all kinds of reasons come along to support that disbelief. So let's say you're doing great with the first two parts. You're doing great with the allowing, you're doing great with the activity, but for some reason, the action part is getting blocked, or you're slowing down on this portion, and you're not even sure why this is happening. You are not sure what to do next. What if you're starting to have some of that disbelief that Eric Butterworth wrote about? Or maybe you're even starting to think your idea, maybe it's a little too daring, maybe it's a little too weird or too different. And we have, and maybe you just don't have the courage to move forth to that next part, that action part. Brene Brown reminds us, you can choose courage or you can choose comfort. You cannot choose both. So, you may have to go out of your comfort zone a little bit to take the necessary action. Dr. Joe Dispenza states, the unknown is the perfect place to create from. It's the place where all the possibilities are. That's where they exist. What can be better than that? Most of us have been conditioned to run from the unknown, so now we have to learn to become comfortable in that void of the unknown instead of fearing it. If you told me that you didn't like being in that void because it's so disorienting and that you can't see what lies ahead and you can't predict your future, Dr. Joe says, I'd say that's actually great, because that's the best way to predict the future, is to create it, not from the known, but from the unknown. And many of you may know that I teach second grade, and if not, now you know. And I found this wonderful children's book that addresses this. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of times children's books are just so simple. We as adults make things very complicated at times. So I found this book that's a New York Times bestseller and award-winning book for anyone that has a big idea. It's by Kobe Yamada, and it's called What Do You Do with an Idea? So this is, I'm not going to read it to you, but this is it's a wonderful book, and it's award-winning, and on the back of the book, it asks the question, what will become of your idea? It's all up to you. This book is about a brilliant child who has a brilliant idea. It doesn't tell you what the idea is, just that it is an idea. And the idea, I love this, the idea is depicted as an egg, which, you know, when we think of like new life, we think of eggs. It also has a crown and it also has legs. Okay, where am I? There we go. So the sketches in the book, I just want to tell you, they're not black and white, they're more like a brown and white, and they're sort of dull, except for the idea. The idea is the only thing in color. So the boy notices he has an idea, and it's following him. As the boy narrates the story, he says he noticed he had an idea, but he didn't know what to do with it. He tried ignoring his idea. Does that sound familiar? And he even acted like the idea didn't belong to him, but it still followed him around. And the boy began to wonder what other people would think about his idea. I'm sure that's never ever happened to any of you, right? So he decided to keep the idea to himself. And he hid it away, and he didn't talk about it. He tries to act like everything's the same as it was before his idea showed up. In fact, there's even an illustration where he takes the idea and he covers it with all these sticks, and he tries to hide it. But on the next page, the idea shows up again, and the boy says, well, there was something magical about my idea, and I have to admit, I even felt better and happier when it was around. And you can see the boy smiling when the idea pops up of where he had hid it. And this is just like us, creating our ideas and our life. We are creative beings. That's one of our qualities. And we need to create to move forward in our lives. So back to the book, What Do You Do with an Idea? So now the boy shares his idea with some people. And some people do laugh, and some people say it'll never amount to anything. And at first he believes them, but then he starts to question them. What do they really know? This is my idea, and it's okay if it's different, or it's weird, or it's a little crazy. And then he starts to give his idea some attention, and that's the action part. And the idea grows, and so does his love for it. His idea encourages him to think big and then bigger. And the boy feels alive when he's with his idea. And he states, I couldn't imagine my life without it. And then one day, his idea changes right before his eyes. It becomes something amazing. It spreads its wings, and it takes flight, and it bursts into the sky. And this is where the illustrations change. It's a 2-page, totally in color. And you see his idea blooming and swirling. And the boy says, I think this is so profound, it wasn't just a part of me anymore. Now it was a part of everything. And on the very last page, the boy is smiling, and he's the one that's wearing the crown now. And he says, I realize what you do with an idea. You change the whole world. So look how the boy in the book allowed his idea to form, believes in it for the interactivity, and then he took the action that was needed to bring it forward. He gave his idea the attention and the space to grow. He gave birth to his idea, being an egg, that really makes sense. And it's about what Holmes talked earlier in Creative Mind and Success. They're the same 3 steps that we need to do with our ideas: allow, activity, and action. Now, these 3 steps may look different with each idea we have in creating a life that we love, but each step is very important. The second and third steps, the activity and the action, might be different each time you're creating, but rest assured that you will be led to the perfect action needed in each situation. You are never alone in this creative process. And in closing, I'd like to read the dedication that the author of What Do You Do with an Idea wrote to his own children. Kobe Yamada dedicated his wonderful book to his children, writing, always remember, a single idea can change everything. And I want to end this talk by asking the same question that I started with. What will you allow God to do through you to create a life you love?
Bravo.